Hello and welcome. The late Prime Minister Manmohan Singh said, history will judge him better. And to talk about one of the high points of his term, the historic Indo-US civil nuclear deal, I'm joined today by his National Security Adviser, Mr. M.K. Narayanan, who steered the Indo-US nuclear deal to its conclusion. Mr. Narayanan, welcome to News 9.
Thank you.
Mr. Narayanan, as NSA, you steered the Indo-US civil nuclear deal. 16 negotiations with the US side. And one of your team members on those talks told me that those negotiations were among the most complex talks ever undertaken by independent India. Tell us how this deal actually came about in the first place. How did it start?
I would say that the nuclear deal was the icing on the cake as far as Mr. Manmohan Singh was concerned. It started with a brief meeting between Mr. Manmohan Singh and President Bush on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in 2004. When at that meeting, the Prime Minister, when President Bush asked the Prime Minister, "What can I do for you?" he said, "We have a problem with regard to energy. The prices of oil are shooting up day by day." I think he said it may even reach $40. I think you can imagine what it was at that time. So Mr. Bush said, "Well, I can help you in what way?" He said, "We have this problem about nuclear aspects and whatnot." He said, "Let's do something about it." So he came back from the United States after the UN General Assembly. And at that time, Dixit was also there. Both of us, he sent for both of us and said, "Your charter here is to somehow manage something, a breakthrough on the nuclear aspect." But he was talking then about nuclear fuel. I mean, how would we be able to import nuclear uranium, etc., etc. Almost immediately thereafter, Dixit passed away, so the whole thing fell into my lap. The issue then was that you couldn't separate the uranium issue from the larger issue of nuclear matters. And I had very little knowledge about this. The Prime Minister only gave me and said, "I want you to get this thing through, because that's what we will do." We ran into a lot of issues on the way, but we never ever envisaged that the nuclear deal would be such a major, what could I call, tiebreaker or major issue as far as India and the world are concerned.
What about the chemistry between Manmohan Singh and President George W. Bush of the US? This deal is literally a story of these two very different individuals. Tell us how they actually worked to bring this deal together.
Sandeep, you would recall that after the nuclear tests that took place in the late 90s, there was almost a total embargo put on us. We couldn't import uranium. India has very little uranium, and whatever little uranium exists is extremely poor quality. So we began on a very, what I call, a humble note, saying, lift the embargo on being able to import import uranium. We had a lot of issues. I mean, I want to say that the nuclear establishment, the atomic energy establishment, I would say, was as much opposed to this thing, because they knew that the moment we said that, there would be many steps that would be taken by the West in crippling their efforts, because they had done a remarkable job, despite all the embargoes that were put on them, in being able to take our movement forward, particularly on the not so much on the energy side as on the military side. We had after the Pokhran test, we had gone forward, etc. So they were afraid that whatever concessions were made would mean putting them on the almost on the sidelines of what was taking place. So my task was to get through this. The concerns about in the political establishment, that whatever we did with the Americans would mean compromising on our independent foreign policy. The nuclear establishment, we felt that we would sell out to the Americans, and the nuclear establishment had been treated extremely shabbily by the Americans, particularly, but the entire West. They were treated almost like I don't want to use the normal word that we use because I think that's, but saying that you're not meant to be on the same table with us and all that kind of stuff. So, but Mr. Manmohan Singh just told me it's your task. You must deal with this. And I mean, I must say there was a touch of God in all this, because I was wondering what to do. The National Security Adviser of France rang me up, saying that I'm slated to come to India on an invitation by a predecessor, just a few who had sent him an invitation just before he died. Would you like me to delay my arrival or not? I said, no, please come, because I want your help, because I know France was the one country during this whole thing that was friendly to us, particularly on nuclear matters. And I hope to learn a lot from him. I'd also get his help. And I must say that was, I mean, not so much a touch of genius on my side, but on someone else's side, because Gordon Montane, who was the French National Security Advisor, was remarkably good at hand-holding. And he explained to me each single step that would be needed and what steps that France would do to help us go through the process. So he came and he talked to me. Then he said, the first thing you need to do is you need to go to the UK. You need to meet the UK NSA. They didn't call him NSA, they called him policy advisor or whatever it is. And then I will join you when you're in London, and then we will go to the United States and meet Mr. Stephen Hadley, who is the US NSA. Now, all this Gordon Montane, the Frenchman, did on his own initiative. He said, you just ring them up. And then I was going for the Munich Security Conference. He said, we'll meet all kinds of people, including the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, the UN Atomic Energy Council. And he said, we will set up. So that's how we started this whole process. And at a stage when we were almost just above maybe zero, it was probably 1 or 2, we found steps being created, the many obstacles being removed by one. We went to the United States. Most of the negotiations were with the US. The others were side players who would follow the lead given by the United States. We had an initial round of talks, myself with Steve Hadley, the US NSA, who I must confess was extremely helpful. But the Department of State and the Department of Energy were naturally hostile. But we made a minor, I would say, some breakthrough at that point. And then came the famous visit of Prime Minister Manmohan Singh to the United States in May that year, in May 2005, May 2005. And I want to say that the nuclear deal is essentially a deal between Manmohan Singh and President Bush. I think the meeting between President Bush and Mr. Manmohan Singh was one of those meetings where chemistry between two leaders came out in blood. And I remember Mr. Bush saying, Manmohan, I will help you in whatever you want, irrespective of whatever. Please see that your NSA and my NSA are able to work things out together. And he was as good as his word. The Department of State still followed the Cold War mentality. They didn't want India to be on the high table. The Department of Energy felt that we were giving away so much. But at every stage in the process, our negotiators, and I want to pay a particular tribute to Venkatesh Verma, who later became our ambassador to Russia, because he knew how to marshal the ideas in the language and in a way that the Americans could not fault. I don't think they ever accepted everything that he said. So the point I'm making is that we had to break through the shibboleths, the cobwebs of many, many years. And there was an intrinsic hostility which existed between the nuclear establishment in the United States and the Department of State with the Indian side, and more particularly with the Indian nuclear establishment, etc. There were, of course, some degree of frictions among sectors. I was lucky that I did not belong to any of them. I was never part of the foreign policy establishment previously. Of course, I couldn't be a nuclear scientist. I was an outsider. Being an outsider in this case seemed to help. But whatever you might say about the negotiators and the details, etc., the one thing that helped right through was the Manmohan Singh-Bush relationship. And Bush was as good as his word. Can you imagine a sort of a minor bureaucrat like me being able to meet the President of the United States on at least 7 to 8 occasions, not in public meetings, but in one-on-one along with my counterpart. And the only point would be saying, what's the problem? And Steve Hadley would say, Department of Energy has this problem, or Department of State. He said, what does Manmohan have to say? And he would say what Manmohan had to say. He said, Manmohan is a good man. I would like to. So at every stage, we came up against a major hold-up, or whatever it is. President Bush would, without formally declaring it as a presidential imperative. Dr. Kakotkar was on the Indian side as the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission. Was in a sense able to override many of the what are called the hang-ups that the Indian atomic energy establishment had about entering into any agreement with the United States. And thanks to his presence, thanks to the ability of the negotiators on the Indian side who could cross the T's and dot the I's in a manner satisfactory to the Americans. And above all, the overweening presence, though it was not present every day or every day, but right through the negotiation, presence of President Bush and the Bush-Manmohan Singh relationship. The deal was right. I mean, the language, of course, was made in a manner that it would satisfy not only the US side or the Indian side, but the atomic energy establishment the world over, or the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. More so, when it came to getting it through the US Congress, when we had to do the 1, 2, 3 agreement, it was the finesse with which the agreement was reached that made all the difference. So I would say that whatever may be the stellar roles played by the negotiators on both sides, and whatever might have been the abilities on either side, it was the Bush-Manmohan Singh relationship which ensured that we had the deal. 2005, May was I think May 5th, if I remember the date, was the date when the two sides agreed, or rather the president and the prime minister agreed and signed on the dotted line. And after that, it was basically a question of negotiations between the negotiators on side, first with the US, so that we could finalize the 1, 2, 3 agreement, we could finalize many things, and then with the International Atomic Energy Agency, where the then chairman L. Baradai was also very favorably disposed towards India. So that's how the nuclear deal came through.
That's an absolutely fascinating story. The fact that the Indo-US civil nuclear deal began as a simple request for buying uranium for India's nuclear power plants, but nearly 2 decades later, India is a member of 3 or 4 export-controlled regimes: the Australia Group, Wassenaar Arrangement, and the MTCR, the Missile Technology Controlled Regime, all set up to deny India access to high technology. Back then, almost 2 decades ago, did you anticipate the unintended benefits of the Indo-US nuclear deal?
Once the nuclear deal could be reached, and we had sold the idea to several countries, many of us traveled across the world to talk to countries that were involved in the process, it was obvious that we had something like a wonder drug on our hands. Many doors were opened. Many things where we were shut out from became clear that we could now enter. So the nuclear deal was, to that extent, a major step forward. Our biggest problem was how to sell the nuclear deal to India, where we had our problems of various kinds.
Mr. Narayanan, it's said that Prime Minister Singh was a very good bureaucrat, good at implementation. Case in point being the 1991 economic reforms. The reforms were Prime Minister Narasimha Rao's conviction that it must be done. Why did Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, display what may be called an astonishing and single-minded pursuit for the Indo-US civil nuclear deal? I mean, he went out on a limb with that deal. It was his baby, and he was so passionate about it that he was willing to risk his government's survival on this deal. And this is a deal that wouldn't have fetched him many political dividends. In fact, it turned the left parties against his government and threatened his survival.
No, I think you're being less than fair to Mr. Manmohan Singh. He's not what you call an apparatchik. He's not an implementer. If I have to describe Mr. Manmohan Singh, with whom I dealt with for 10 years, he is not only scholarly, but he's conceptually one of the brightest persons that you can think of. He may not, when the nuclear deal, or when the nuclear issue came up with his meeting with President Bush came up, he obviously was not looking at this transforming the entire international landscape and India's place in it. But very soon, because whenever I used to come back and brief him after the discussion we had, he would ask me searching questions. How would this affect our relationship in the rest of the world? How would this impact our relationship, particularly with Russia, with whom we had very close relations? How would they take it? It's difficult because Mr. Manmohan Singh doesn't talk to really to conceive of what he's thinking of. It's only when you sit back, when you talk to him, whenever he used to travel, he used to explain what his vision was. And let me tell you that step by step, he realized that he had come across with, and with that, the passion for this nuclear deal with the United States became almost an obsession. He was not what I would call an activist in that sense of the term. But I want to correct you on the point that in terms of the term during the Narasimha Rao period, when he was the finance minister, he was the real thinker in that. I don't think Narasimha Rao had. I knew Narasimha Rao extremely well. I knew him for years. Narasimha Rao showed tremendous, what should I say, use a word like guts, to push through the economic reforms. And without Narasimha Rao as Prime Minister, maybe it might not have been possible. But the entire process was driven by the thinking was driven by Manmohan Singh. Similarly, when he came to the nuclear, he suddenly realized as he went along, because he had a very scholarly mind, that this was going to be the issue on which India's future is going to be based. Something that many of us at that time never realized. And whenever we traveled and we used to say, where are you on the nuclear deal? How do you see? And he would say, how important this is going to be. This is going to be as important as he once remarked, saying that the overweening presence of Gandhiji on the world stage sort of stuff. That's the kind of mind that he had. You asked him about the Wassenaar Agreement or the 123 Agreement, he wouldn't know anything. He didn't bother about that, but he realized what the implications were. And once he realized that we were on the cusp of getting an agreement with the United States, and through thanks to the United States with the International Atomic Energy Agency and the rest of the world, he was determined that whether he remained as Prime Minister or not did not matter, that this deal had to go through. My task was to do the counting numbers. How do you deal with this? And I did use a lot of unorthodox means during that period. But Mr. Manmohan Singh, I didn't want to bring him into the picture. He would never agree with what we did. But the point at issue is he was determined to push through the deal, because not because of the deal per se, as much as he realized what it meant for the future of India. Something which most of us, and I think most of the others that we were dealing with, quite understood would be the implications.
What are these unorthodox methods that you use to get this deal through, Mr. Narayan?
When I write my memoirs, which will be published after I die, I shall let you know what I did.
I have to ask you this. Are you working on your memoirs? Memoirs of the former NSA, a very interesting chapter in India's history. Are you working on your memoirs, sir?
No. I have no such intention to do so, because then I would then probably say many things which I never did, so as to make the memoirs, so as to sell the memoirs. So I don't propose that, because I think some things have to go down. I've been around in the game of intelligence for many years, so there are many things. No, when I say unorthodox, I don't think we did any, what I would say, irregular things in that sense of the term. As much as you do a certain amount of bean counting. For instance, how did we get the sorry, the names miss me. The Samajwadi Party leader on board, for instance. How I had to use the former president to help out. That's the kind of thing. I mean, not the things that would normally come into the picture, because we wanted the numbers in parliament.
You got the former NSA Brajesh Mishra to come out very strongly and endorse the nuclear agreement.
Yes, Mr. Brajesh Mishra played a very important role, because I think Brajesh Mishra and Mr. Vajpayee, who was not in the best of health at that time, realized what this meant, whereas the rest of the BJP felt did not. I mean, whether they understood or did not understand, anyway, they were opposed to the deal. We required Brajesh Mishra to articulate what would be the advantages of a deal of this kind.
Now, India is the only major country in the world which has a strategic partnership with both the United States and the Russian Federation. Now, given the present adversarial relationship between these two countries, do you see us in India being pushed into a position where we'll be forced to take sides, to choose one country over the other?
Even when we were much weaker than we are today, we could not be pushed into either camp. I mean, I think I mentioned to you, I've been around for a long time. I've been around when we were buffeted between the US-led camp and the Soviet camp and whatnot. But we remained firm. We suffered because of that. Today, I don't think there's any country in the world that can really push us. Economically, we are, I think, the fourth biggest nation, and we are shortly going to be the third.
Mr. Narayanan, do you foresee the prospect of war between India and China?
Militarily, I think we are pretty good. I mean, everybody talks of an India-China war. I think I'm better placed than many others to say that I don't see a Sino-Indian conflict. There will be frictions on the northern border, but that not be war. People talk of the Indian Ocean. I think neither China nor India wants to fight a war on the oceans, whether the Indian or the Pacific Ocean. I have reservations about being a member of the Quad, saying that I don't see a particular advantage that we get from it. So I think we are in a very unique position. Countries want us to be part of them. Nobody wants India out of their tent. I think what we require, and at the moment we have a strong leadership. I don't think we have any major issues. We have problems all around us. I think we are an oasis of peace around this entire area. China and India have problems, but I think China and India will have problems always, because they are two civilizations which are vying for a place, not now, but as far as the world is concerned. So there will be friction, there will be conflict, but I don't think, unless either country has people with absolutely no strategic sense, that there will be a conflict. the United the United States, I mean, look at it. There's only one United States, maybe in the entire Western world, which has some strength today. I know I'm making a very controversial statement. I was at an international conference just a fortnight ago, and I made the point. I mean, people talk of Europe, people talk of many other parts of the world, etc. The United States is still this thing, but I think even its economy is not as strong as it's being made out to be. There is China, where you have under Xi Jinping trying its best to firm up its economy, which has been sliding for a long time. India is today in a unique position. So what exactly do we need to be concerned about? There's no question of our joining either bloc or any bloc, nor does India want a bloc. All around India, I mean, the whole South Asian region and a little beyond it. From our point of view, the near abroad, I mean, it's unfortunate for us that the Middle East, I mean, Saudi Arabia, etc., and others are not in a position to exert their capability. So I think what we need to do is to how do we become the numero uno of the world, not that whether we will join one bloc or the other. And I say this with a full sense of things. I've been here for nearly 70 years in this field, and I say that with a sense of responsibility.
Mr. Narayanan, thank you very much for joining us.